All right, here we are. Good news, December 2020. We keep going strong, right?
Yeah,
We're in our fifth year, I think.
unbelievable. Is it really? That's mind-boggling. Really mind-boggling.
Good times, good times.
And we'll be talking about the mind a little bit today.
That's true. That's true. Our topic is cause and effect. We'll talk about the unreality of the body a little bit. Charlie's got a little bit of a cold.
Yeah, which is not real.
But it does seem to be affecting him.
Yeah, at the moment, it seems to be, yeah. So we always want to start off with a prayer on page 28. And so we'll do that now, and then
yeah, you bet.
You can do much on behalf of your own healing and that of others if, in a situation calling for help, you think of it this way. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent Him who sent me. I do not have to worry about what to say or what to do, because He who sent me will direct me. I am content to be wherever He wishes, knowing He goes there with me. I will be healed as I let Him teach me to heal.
Thank you. All right. So always a good reminder that we should ask and turn everything over to the Spirit within. The Spirit within is always there for us. It's always offering us everything we need. And oftentimes we think we want to do it on our own. So that prayer is sort of our way of saying, let me go of my way of doing things. Help me to let go of that and help me to really embrace your way, because it's sort of, we often say it's my way or the highway. Well, we could say it's my way or the highway, right? And we want to choose the highway. We want to choose that way of peace, that way of love, that way of truth. And as always, we want to recognize the Foundation for A Course in Miracles, who has supplied this great chart that we always refer to. This is basically a chart of the mind. Right? This is a chart that shows us what our experience is, and it helps us to remember what we really are. We start off in our truth and our oneness, and then we descend on the left side of the chart down into the world of form. So this is where we choose the ego. This is where we leave the mind. And as we leave the mind, we forget that we left the mind. Right? So this is a part of the ego's trick, is that as we choose these thoughts of separation and victimization, and seem to move more and more into this experience of being a body in a world, we don't remember all that's before, right? So we have these veils, and it even says here, veil of forgetfulness, right? We forget that we have a mind. We think that we are ensconced in a world of time and space, right? But we are not. We are still a mind, even though we've forgotten it. We'll always be a mind that we can remember to return to, because that's the theme that we get in the Course over and over again, is that we want to choose light and love and let go of our choice of fear, so that we always have these two things to choose between, fear or love, right? That's what it breaks down to, and that's what the Course helps us to see very, very simply. However, the words fear and love in the Course mean something that can be a little different than the sort of everyday usage that we have. Right? Everyday usage of fear is really just this idea, I'm afraid of that thing, I'm afraid of this person, I'm afraid of something that might hurt me. But in reality, fear, this ego side of things, is an all-encompassing idea. So fear is more or less synonymous with the ego itself. If we're choosing fear, we're choosing the ego. So this is some amount of resistance or separation, and it encompasses anything that is separate. So fear, the belief in separation inevitably leads to fear. And what we want to do is we want to start to keep choosing love, because that is how fear is undone. That is how our suffering is undone. That is how all of our anger and pains and travails and issues, all of these are undone the same way. So this is what makes A Course in Miracles so simple, right? Is that we just have to do this one thing, right? Choose kindness, choose Holy Spirit, choose love. We just have to do this one thing again and again and again and again. And it might seem that we do it thousands of times, maybe even millions of times. But over time, what happens as we do this is our attachment to the ego dissolves. So we talk a lot about the ego in our workshops and our talks, and it all often sounds like the ego is our problem. But the ego is not our problem. Why is that true? Because there is no ego. We can't have a problem with something that doesn't exist, right? Our problem is that we believe in the ego. It's our belief in the ego that is the whole issue. It is the whole work of A Course in Miracles, all 1,300 plus pages, to undo that belief in the ego. So we're undoing our belief in fear. We're undoing our belief in separation. We're undoing our belief that attack is possible. And it kind of mixed into that whole bag. We're undoing this idea that death is a thing, right? Because what does death say? Death says something can end. And what does heaven tell us? Heaven tells us that only what is eternal is true. And when we are in this state of oneness, when we're in this state at the very top of the chart, there is no death, there is no separation, there is no suffering. So these things that seem so commonplace in our world of time and space are actually alien to our true state of being. And again, this is why A Course in Miracles is so radical, because it really undoes pretty much everything in our experience here in this world. And it's a part of why I think A Course in Miracles isn't more popular than it is, right? Because when people start to really get the message of the Course, something in them kind of freaks out. Charlie and I have been in this teaching role for a number of years, and between the two of us, there's so many people that sort of come in, they're very excited, and then all of a sudden they're gone, right? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But what's happening here is that the ego in them is really resisting this message. Most people just want to be happy as people. And when you start telling them that this body that they are, that this separate person that they think they are, is not true, it's never been true, a lot of people sort of say, I'm not sure this message is for me. I don't know if I want to go that far. I just want to be less mad. I want to be in less pain. I want to be, a little happier in my life. But the Course is all-encompassing. The Course is uncompromising. And that the message is that all of these sort of temporary fixes in the world, yeah, that's all good. Any sort of thing that makes you feel better here in the world, sure, that's fine. But if it doesn't address the real issue, which is what the Course calls the tiny mad idea, which is our belief that we are separate from God, if these things do not address and help to undo this thought of separation in our mind, then we're just spinning our wheels. Nothing's really happening. It's just, what do they say, like putting lipstick on a pig, Might make it look a little better, but, it still kind of stinks. So, so this is the idea. And the theme for today is cause and effect, right? Because the Course uses these terms a lot, right? Jesus talks about cause and effect. What is he talking about when he says these things? Well, really what he's saying, first let's talk about the world's understanding of cause and effect. The world's understanding of cause and effect is very Newtonian, right? It's this idea that, I say I'm driving and I push my foot on the gas pedal, right? I'm causing the vehicle to go forward. The effect is that the vehicle is going to go forward because I'm pushing the gas pedal, right? This is the worldly sense of cause and effect. I have a chair and I push the chair and the chair moves. I have caused the chair to move. And the effect is that the chair is in a different place, right? When Jesus is talking about cause and effect, he's not talking about any of that, right? Jesus is talking about the mind when he's talking about cause. And he's saying that the mind has caused everything in the world of time and space. So again, the mind is cause, the effect is this world of time and space and everything in it. So again, we think cause and effect is all within the world, but cause is actually beyond the world, and the effect is our experience here in the world. And what he's helping us to see is if we want to change the effect, if we want to change this experience of being in the world, if it's not working for us, the solution is not going to be found in the world. right? We can change this world as much as we want. We can try to get better relationships, try to get more money in our bank account, try to get, whatever it is we think is going to make us happy. A better car, better house, better clothes, a better relationship. All of these things we've tried again and again. And they may seem to work for a while, right? Maybe for a day or a month or even a few months, we seem to be happy about something. Maybe even a few years. But then something always goes wrong here. And the ego is never completely satisfied. The ego always is asking for more. So when we want to fix what seems to be the unhappiness we find at what's happening here, Jesus is saying you're not going to find that fix by changing things in this level of effect. You need to go back to the cause. You need to remember that underneath all of this world that is appearing here in front of you, behind it and before it is the mind. And this is where the choice for happiness lies. This is where we can really look at our unhappiness with gentleness and kindness and compassion and start to see, I can let some of that go. I can let some of my judgment go. To take a very basic situation. If we have a relationship and there's someone that we're very angry with, we're very tense with, and again, it looks like that other person is the reason I'm unhappy, we can start to realize it's not really the case. I'm not unhappy because of them or what they did or didn't do. I'm really unhappy because there's unhappiness in me. And this is where I want to go to fix it. It kind of reminds me of a Wayne Dyer saying. I remember him saying once, if you squeeze an orange, what do you get? Right? Orange juice. Right? And he said, well, why do you get orange juice from an orange? Because that's what's inside an orange. Right? And he said, well, if someone squeezes you and out comes anger, it's because the anger was in you. It's not because of the squeezing, right? And so we want to remember that so that we can start to release that from within and eventually come back more and more to the peace that we are. So.
Thank you, Dean. I was struck by a couple of words you used very close to each other. One was simplicity, and the other was radical. Mm-hmm. So this concept of this simple message the Course has, let's change the way you think, is really what Jesus is trying to teach us. He wants us to start thinking differently than the way we always have in this world of illusion, right? And he wants us to start thinking with Holy Spirit. So we go back to the very beginning of the Course, the first thing it really says is nothing real can be threatened, right? So this is reality, real, nothing real can be threatened. And nothing unreal exists. So the rest of this doesn't even exist. So this is all an illusion going on. And what he wants us to do is for us to start to understand that. And this is, again, getting back to this whole theory of cause and effect, right? If I'm thinking with this teacher, the wrong-minded thought system, I am going to get nothing but this world of chaos that Barret's talking about, this world of separation, this world of division, this world of guilt and fear and anger. If I'm thinking with Holy Spirit, I'm going to have a different experience, right? Not that one, and I'm going to have a more real experience. Now, just because I'm coming over here and I'm working on my healing and my practicing my forgiveness, it doesn't mean that I'm walking around la, 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 la in heaven, because I still have this dilemma going on, right? I think I'm a body, and my voice today is evidence of that, I think I'm a body. I've got this cold, I'm sniffling, hacking and wheezing. So, it's just an affirmation for my ego. That's all it really is. I don't have to worry about it or anything. It's just recognition. I can recognize exactly what it is. But I want to get back to this idea of cause and effect, because Barret touched on in the quote for today's little flyer, the Course says you are you emphasize in italics, you are the dreamer of the world of dreams. No other cause it has, nor ever will. It's simply the way we think. We think the Son of God, who believes in this tiny mad idea we've separated from our Father, thinks this world is real, and we keep giving ourselves stories, affirmations, circumstances to prove it's true. This world is true, and that's what the ego does.
It's going to do it over and over and over again. And the practice for us, this simple practice, as you touched on, this simple practice is to choose differently. The whole text, you end up at the end of the text, and that's the last chapter in the 31 chapters, right, of the text. Choose once again. So it's that simple, We just have to, as you were saying, thousands and thousands and thousands of times we make this choice, and then we do an about face and we're hanging out with the ego. I was just telling Barret today, last couple of weeks for me have been kind of, I described it to a friend of mine the other day. It's like I've got one prong in the socket, I'm not totally disconnected from reality. I have little glimmers of it now and then. But, over the last couple of weeks, this plug is getting a little looser and a little looser, I'm not totally connected. Both plugs aren't inserted all the way. And I'm not totally disconnected. But I felt more and more under the sway of the ego, and I was driving around the other day and it was just like, I was ticked at everybody on the road. I don't know what was going on, but I catch myself doing it, and I'm just in total amazement, really. I just kind of sit back behind the wheel going, look at the way you're thinking. Look at the judgment stuff you're doing. Look how oppressed you've felt for the last couple of weeks. And as I've let this plug come out more and more, the oppression just gets heavier and heavier. I see more and more judgmental and more critical and more less and less patient. And so I started to catch I started to realize this the other day. A couple of days ago. It was like, oh man, I've seen the way this is built up to get me to this point, right? I've been choosing to hang out with the ego and listen to all its stories, projecting guilt onto people all over the place. And this is what I get. I get this uncomfortable feeling, this dissatisfaction, and a hacking cough. So, a friend of mine on the phone the other day, I was telling her about what was going on with my, what I was learning, the lessons I was learning. And I happened to mention that now I got a cold. And she goes, well, what do you expect? So not that the two really are related, but it's interesting to see how that, I've been hanging out with the ego, and now all of a sudden, the body's really real. Feel this one, start sniffling. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of touch on that this morning. So the Course, what Jesus is doing with the Course is helping us to see. We think a certain way. The early parts of the Course is really that. He's telling us, look at the way you think. Here's the way you think with the ego. This is the result you get. You're going to have this kind of oppression, this difficulty, this anxiety, this fear. Fear is constant in the world of the ego. And so I want you to see it. He's telling us, I want you to see the way you do this. And know there's another choice. There's another way to see this stuff going on, right? And you do that with Holy Spirit. So the trick for us is to constantly go to Holy Spirit and ask for that help and ask for that clarity. And that was a realization for me after, pulling this plug out a little bit. I wasn't going to Holy Spirit at all over that period of time. I was disconnected from other Course students. I was disconnected from my morning routine. I was just disconnected, and the ego just slowly was winning this, chipping away, winning this little battle going on in my mind, right? Until this clarity came about, So again, it's about changing the way we think. That's really what Jesus is asking us to do. Look at the way you think, you're insane. He tells us over and over again. Look at the way you think, you're insane. How about thinking differently? Why don't you go to a different teacher? And that's what he's asking us to do, And this concept of cause and effect is just that. The cause is my thinking. The cause of whichever way I see it. I can choose which teacher I want to work with. And the effect of that choice is going to be either fear or love. There's only two choices. And that, so I've just been describing, how I've been choosing to be with the ego and in fear the last couple of weeks. And yet I also know that I've had an experience where that doesn't take place, where when I choose to work with Holy Spirit, the fear isn't there, the concern isn't there, the judgment isn't there. And that's a much more peaceful place to be than the other one.
Why do you think it took so long to make this change or to realize it?
Again, I think it's just a little bit of giving into ego and a little bit more, it's just a subtle, Jesus, in fact, even tells us that in the Course, the ego is very subtle. It's going to play games with you. You're not going to see it happening. it's going to work on you very, very much so, until you get to this point where, I hope I never get to that point, but I mean, I'm sure you get to the point where you just put all this, put all this aside, jump back in the world of the ego and stay there, not a place I particularly want to go, but I was choosing it, The wonderful thing about this is really, is now getting back to this observer's point and seeing it, rather than being in the battleground, picking off all the other drivers, or, observing that I want to choose to be in the battleground, picking off them, and that I think was the moment of clarity. It was like, oh, and it's not that I didn't sense it, but I wasn't really, I was just being forgetful. I was forgetting to go to Holy Spirit every time I felt a little uncomfortable. I was forgetting to go to Holy Spirit. And I know it works because I've done it so many times. If I go to Holy Spirit, this circumstance will be seen differently.
Do you feel better now that you realize what was going on?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the joy is back. Yeah. Vigilance. Yeah. Be vigilant for God and His kingdom. Exactly.
Why do we find it so wearying, though?
The vigilance is wearying. Yeah. Well, because a part of us doesn't want to wake up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the ego is going to kick up its heels at this, and again, subtle ways, blatant ways. The ego loves it all, right? As long as it leads to lack of peace, then the ego's happy.
Yeah. So this is one of the first quotes I have is, whenever there is fear, it is because you have not made up your mind. Your mind is therefore split, and your behavior inevitably becomes erratic. Correcting at the behavioral level can shift the error from the first to the second type, but will not obliterate the fear, right? So getting back to what Barret said before, we can't fix the illusion.
Yeah. And we try, right? We try to fix the illusion again and again, but as we're talking about, if we don't get back to undoing the tiny mad idea, all those efforts will ultimately be for nothing, because this is the source of all of our upset. Right? If we don't go to the source, there's some myth or something about these villagers who lived alongside a river, and all of a sudden there was like a baby that was floating down the river, and of course they went and grabbed the baby, and they started to care for it and do what they could to be there for it. But then the next day another baby came down, and then the day after that, like 2 babies came down, and they're bringing all these babies in and caring for them and doing the best they can. But until you go up the river and see why all these, babies are coming down the river, the problem is just going to get worse and worse. And in a sense, that's what we do with the ego, is we just try to deal with it on the sort of, practical, immediate level. Just do whatever we need to on this level of the world. And if we're not going to what's underneath it, then again, it's just going to keep spinning and cycling over and over again. Whether it jumps through in kind of subtle ways, like, oh yeah, I'm starting to feel a little off, and I had something like that this morning too, or on the drive here, all of a sudden I noticed I was kind of like short with Edith, I dropped her off before we got here, but I was like, why was I so irritable about this thing that she said, right? And okay, let's go to what's under it, right? What's under it, I could feel that there was judgment and anger and upset, irritation, all these sort of energies in me. I'm like, okay, let's acknowledge that and come to see that whatever she said really was not the source of what my sort of snappy comeback to her was. And then I could see that, and then again remember that it was some form of separation in me. There was some judgment, there was some deeper root to it, and that even like we were just talking about, even just realizing that's what's happening, even if it wasn't completely shifted through, all of a sudden I felt at least better. I was more present. I wasn't sarcastic or snappy after that with her. So even if we haven't gotten through all of the issue, we know there's still more going on. Just starting to realize this is what's happening and doing the first step or two can start to make us at least somewhat more peaceful, somewhat more happy. So
when this happens, do we just accept it, or do we beat ourselves up for what's going on?
I would say neither, right? Definitely not the second, right? Because if we're beating ourselves up for it, then we're just reinforcing the ego's guilt cycle. We're actually projecting guilt onto ourself as a separate body, and we're reinforcing and strengthening the ego's grip. We also just don't want to accept it either, because that's mean, right? To just, oh, okay, I was mean and I'll be mean again, but whatever, none of it's real. You can use these concepts in kind of an unkind way. So there's sort of a place I would call a little, maybe like the third way, where it's like acknowledging, okay, I was unkind and I apologize for that, or I don't want to do that anymore. I see that I was doing that, but then also not being mean to ourselves, right? So we can take responsibility for whatever choices we have made, without judging ourselves for them, without kind of lashing ourselves with the whip.
Did you
Gets
share
to sit
what
in
was
there.
going on with Edith?
That time, no. I just sort of caught it within, and then the dynamic in the car shifted, or whatever tension was building sort of dispelled.
Do you remember Bob Newhart show?
Yeah.
Where he did a counseling session with a woman and just told her, stop it. Stop it.
It's a great quote.
Stop reinforcing your false beliefs,
Yeah.
and start extending love. And it's amazing how you don't always have to have a big conversation.
Yeah.
You just need to stop.
It's true, because the ego is an addiction, right? We are addicted to the ego. We could all get up in these groups and say, hi, my name is Barret, I'm an egoholic. I would say, hi, Barret.
I say I'm addicted to chaos.
There you go. Yeah, ego loves chaos, right?
That's what you are?
That's my.
Ooh.
Yeah. So the quote that I picked out here is sort of the example of how we step out of this, right? So this is from the clarification of terms, the section about Jesus. It says here, the name of Jesus is the name of one who was a man, but saw the face of Christ in all his brothers and remembered God. So he became identified with Christ, a man no longer, but at one with God. The man was an illusion, for he seemed to be a separate being, walking by himself, within a body that appeared to hold his self from self, as all illusions do. Yet who can save unless he sees illusions and then identifies them as what they are? Jesus remains a savior because he saw the false without accepting it as true. And Christ needed his form that he might appear to men and save them from their own illusions. And this is the goal for all of us, and it's sort of fitting in this Christmas, the time of Christ, this season we're in, is to remember that essence of Christ is our truth. And that just like Jesus came to identify with it so much that he identified with the ego no more, that's where we're going with this. That we're really healing every issue, every fear, every judgment that comes up in our life again and again and again, to the point where they actually don't have a charge anymore. And it might seem radical and almost impossible to get there, but it's actually inevitable. And this path is leading us right to this experience. So again, this is the good news, right? The good news is that we're right where we need to be, and that everything, no matter how challenging or upsetting at times they might be, that happens in our life, everything in our life can be used for the purpose of waking up and remembering the Christ that we are.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this in response to your question, Fred. It was everyone experiences fear. Yet it would take very little right thinking to realize why fear occurs. So again, he's telling us this is not a big deal. We make it a big deal, right? Few appreciate the real power of the mind, and no one remains fully aware of it all the time. However, if you hope to spare yourself from fear, there are some things you must realize and realize fully. The mind is very powerful and never loses its creative force. It never sleeps. Every instant it is creating. It is hard to recognize that thought and belief combine into a power surge that can literally move mountains. It appears at first glance that to believe such power about yourself is arrogant, but that is not the real reason you do not believe it. You prefer to believe that your thoughts cannot exert real influence because you are actually afraid of them. This may allay awareness of the guilt, but at the cost of perceiving the mind is impotent. If you believe that what you think is ineffectual, you may cease to be afraid of it, but you are hardly likely to respect it. There are no idle thoughts. All thinking produces form at some level. So again, he's telling us we really need to understand what the Course is teaching us. It's teaching us that we need to think differently. It's again getting back to the simplicity, right? And this whole concept of being radical is true, because we are living in this world that we've created. We projected this entire world of the ego, and everything about this world is telling us that something outside of ourselves is causing the effect that I'm experiencing. So this driver is doing it to me, my spouse is doing it to me, my brother's doing it to me, my boss is doing it to me, the government's doing it to me, somebody's punishing me, somebody's beating me up, somebody's attacking me. That's the whole story that the ego's got going on. And what does the ego want us to do but to counterattack, right? To go right back at it. In fact, the ego's so damn smart, it's going to attack first, right? And that's what it really wants to do. Attack first. Believe this separation is true. Believe the ego's story, and your brother and you are separate.
Is that what's going on in Washington right now?
Again, Washington's a manifestation of this thought system, is what it really is. Washington, all political all circumstances, right, in this illusion are manifestations of this thought system. That's all they really are. And the thought system says we are separate. You and I are separate. My government and I are separate. My country and I are separate. The countries are separate. One body is separate. The body is real. That's all the ego's teaching, right? So Jesus wants to start to understand that if you change the way you think, if you start, again, working with this other teacher and start to see this radical change, if the concept is so simple, switch teachers, right? It's such a simple thought. Well, I'm not going to listen to this teacher anymore. I'm going to listen to him. But it's such a radical thought for us because we're so used to listening to just one teacher. That's all we've ever known, that we get fearful of it. You're going to tell me, you're going to upset my entire construct, my entire world, my entire sense of self is going to be gone. And that is fearful for us. Because why is it fearful? Because I determined over here as a decision maker that God and I are separate. That was the big gig here, right? This tiny mad idea. God and I are separate. And now you want me to radically think that that's not true? Oh, I can't do that. You're gonna wreck everything I've got going. All my pain, all my anger, all my guilt projection. You're gonna ruin it for me. Yeah.
We're so attached to our suffering that the idea of letting it go completely is truly terrifying. And Jesus uses the word terror in here a number of times when he's talking about this process of undoing the ego. He sort of reassures us at one point. He said, don't worry, as you start to study this, that you will be abruptly lifted up and hurled into reality. Because the ego is terrified of going into that formless truth, right? That experience of endless love. We're both pretty big fans of Gary Renard's teachings. And in one of his books, Gary says to his teachers, he says, I think I'm afraid of joy. It's a really interesting statement, but it's true, right? He's naming the issue we all have, right? If we weren't afraid of choosing love in some way, we would just do it, right? If we weren't resistant to awakening, we would be awake. And so this is actually really helpful to see because it shows us why, after years and years of studying, right, for all of us here in this room today, after years and years of studying, we're still resisting, right? We're still choosing anger in all the different ways we do.
Still pulling the plug out.
Yeah, we're still pulling the plug out because we don't want to wake up. Not 100%. Maybe part of us does, right? We all have the right-minded part, and that's why we're sitting here in the room, right? This is why we're here together and practicing these ideas and reinforcing our right mind. But, if the resistance just fell away in this instant, we'd be in complete bliss, complete oneness, complete love for eternity. That's the destination of this work. And when we hear that, we kind of say, well, I want that, right? I want perfect love for the rest of eternity. But a part of us doesn't. And it's so helpful to see that a part of us doesn't, because that shows us why we keep flipping back into fear, why we keep getting sick or yelling at the driver or being irritable with our significant other, or whatever it is, whatever the outer form of this ego upset is. The real reason why we're doing these things is because we don't want to wake up. We don't want to remember the truth. And again, the more we can see that, the more we have a healthy respect for our attachment to the ego. And what does it give us? It actually gives us patience. We become very gentle with ourselves, right? We don't have to beat ourselves up when we've done this again for the 100th time for this week. We can actually be very kind with ourselves, right? So we can say, oh yeah, I made a mistake. I chose the ego again, and if we need to, we can say, I'm sorry, honey, without beating ourselves up. We can just say, yeah, I went to my crazy place again. It's still attractive to me, but I want to keep choosing it less and less. I want to keep choosing love more. I want to be this embodiment of Christ. I want to live like Jesus did. We can't have that as a goal at the same time. And it just leads me to this lesson 5, one of my favorite lessons in the whole workbook. I'm never upset for the reason I think. Right? Because we're always so sure that the reason I'm upset is that person did this, that person said this, the government did this or didn't do that, the president's crazy, people are dropping bombs on other people. I have a flat tire. I mean, there's always something. We can always point at something. And the reason for the pointing is to try to get the guilt within our mind away from us. Because if the guilt is over in that flat tire or in that president or in that government or in that person, it's not in me. At least temporarily, I don't feel it, right? I pushed it out onto that situation. I pushed it out onto them. And I feel a little better. I can breathe a little better. But we don't realize that when we do that, we're not actually releasing the guilt, we're reinforcing it. Right? Because anytime we're making anyone guilty, we're increasing, we're tightening our grip on the thought of guilt itself, which is what all of this is about. It's all about undoing guilt. Right? When we are free from guilt, we'll be free from suffering. So again, this is the difference between cause and effect. The cause of all of our suffering here in the world is the thought of guilt in the mind. The effect then is everything that happens here. It's governments being crazy. It's people starting wars. It's people sniping at their partner in the car. These are the worldly effects of the thought of separation. And sometimes as we choose this path, they seem to intensify. They seem to kind of erupt in our lives. And again, this is just our inner defense against waking up. And we don't need to beat ourselves up. We just find gentleness, we find peace, and then we find a joke or two to tell ourselves along the way. So these are a couple that I found online. There's little stories that people had from their lives. So this is not me, even as I'm saying this. These did not happen to me personally.
Sure.
So after my 91-year-old mother finished having her hair cut and shaved, the stylist said to her, "There, now you look 10 years younger." My mother, unimpressed, said, "Who wants to look 81 years old?" All right, I got another one here. After I paid for my items at an adorable shop in Italy, the salesperson smiled and said, "Grazie," Italian for thank you. My Italian isn't very good, but I knew that the Italian word for you're welcome was the same as the name of a spaghetti sauce, so I confidently replied, "Ragu," and walked out of the store. A few blocks later, it hit me. You're welcome in Italian is prego.
There's a section in here, we're talking about cause and effect today. And of course, there's a section right in chapter 2 titled Cause and Effect. And I just want to talk about one thing that's in here, this concept of creation and miscreation. And what Jesus is explaining to us, that creation is what's going on here, right, in heaven. It's this eternal extension of love, this story of the Father and the Son giving love to one another, and an eternal cycle, it's not really cyclical, but just an eternal experience, right? Miscreation is what we're doing down here. This is where we think, right, where the ego's running the show, and we're creating all these stories. We're creating all this different stuff, creating all these circumstances. This is a miscreation. One is based in love, the other is based in fear. And he makes a very clear point in this. He says, both miracles and fear come from thoughts. So again, we're getting back to this idea of how do we think, right? If you're not free to choose one, you would also not be free to choose the other. By choosing the miracle, right, this choice to work with Holy Spirit, right, by choosing this miracle, you have rejected fear, if only temporarily. Why? Because this is going to jump back in, right? You have been fearful of everyone and everything. You are afraid of God, of me, and of yourself. The me being Jesus, right? You have misperceived or miscreated us, capital U, and believe in what you have made, right? So now I bought into this belief system. I believe this is true. And believe in what you have made. That's the miscreation. You would not have done this if you were not afraid of your own thoughts. The fearful must miscreate because they misperceive creation. When you miscreate, you're in pain. The cause and effect principle now becomes a real expediter, though only temporarily. Actually, cause is a term properly belonging to God. It would be another great word here, cause, right? Cause is a term property belonging to God, and his effect is his Son. Cause and effect, right? God and Son. Where's Son over here? It's not. This entails a set of cause and effect relationships totally different from those you introduce into this creation, right? So this is one thing up here, and we have duality down here. And that's what he's talking about. And that's what we're introducing into this story that we've got going on with the ego, is a story of two, story of duality. There's me and there's everything else, right? And this is a thought system that I buy into. This is, as Barret pointed out so long ago to me, this is a belief system. That's all this is. A decision maker, the Son of God, has a belief system that tells him this is true. And then everything that he does in this belief system is just reaffirming that, just building the bulwark, making it stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's why it's so hard for us to wake up from it. We built this impenetrable. I had this vision one day. I don't remember if you remember this. Back when we had the ego witch thing, remember that one Halloween? And when I was putting that thing together, I had this vision of a castle, a big, huge castle, kind of floating in the sky. And the ego was mounted as the defender, standing on the parapet walls up there. The ego, this big, ugly, black thing. And outside of the castle with this beautiful, bucolic scene, everything was absolutely gorgeous. The lion and the lamb are laying down together next to the river, and the trees are blooming, and it's absolutely beautiful. And you've got this concept going on, this belief system going on, that we're being attacked, and there's nothing happening. Nothing but peace is there. Nothing but peace is present. But I built this fortified monstrosity to protect myself because I simply believe that there's a story going on out here that isn't there. It doesn't even exist. So again, that's just getting back to this concept of what he's telling us. This is miscreation. This is where we've taken your question earlier about sin. Not about sin, but should I beat myself up about this? Should I be guilty? Well, if we note here, sin, guilt, and fear is because the error is real. The mistake I made is real. What he's teaching us over here, the error is not real. It's just a thought, right? And that's where, again, we get back to this concept of recognizing how we think. I can see when I judge the other driver, it's simply a thought. The driver he's not really guilty. He didn't commit a sin. even though I want to, in my ego mind, make him guilty of something. What really happened is just a silly dream, a simple laughter, where I get to I go back to the observation point and go, oh my God, look at the way you're thinking. Look at the way you were thinking. It's serious, it's a great word here. This is serious shit I'm doing here, No, it's not. It's a silly dream. It's to be laughed at. There's nothing serious about it.
Yeah.
Thinking.
So this is the good news, right? And the good news is that we can always choose to remember that it is a silly dream. Now, of course, this world doesn't often look silly. Like when we're in the midst of it, it looks really serious. Yeah. And obviously within the level of form, awful things happen here, right? Bombs are dropped on people and people are killed, tortured, people starve, people have illnesses that are really intense. This is not a happy place we're in here. Right. I mean, even Jesus doesn't call this world good names. I mean, he uses the term slaughterhouse at one point to describe this world because these things happen here, right? This is a world that was made to prove that death is real, that suffering is real, that pain is real. As Jesus says, I think it's in the manual, he said, if God is real, there is no pain. Right. And he said, I think he says the other side first. If pain is real, there is no God, right? Because if pain and suffering were actually real, then and God is endless love and happiness, well, those two things don't fit together, right?
But then what are all the people going through that are in pain, like soldiers in a war?
Right.
What are they experiencing if it's not pain?
Well, they are experiencing pain. But what the Course is saying is that their experience is not the truth. And the Course is saying that for each of us too. What you're experiencing is not the truth. The Course is not saying that this world is not your experience and everything that happens here is not your experience. It is just saying that your experience is not true.
That's pretty big.
Yeah.
Radical thinking, the body is not real.
This world is a false experience. I've heard Ken Wapnick describe this world as a maladaptive solution to a non-existent problem. So the non-existent problem is the thought that we're separate from God. Because we think we're guilty over separating from God, we need to come up with something. And this is what the ego cooked up. The ego cooked up a world of suffering that seems to prove separation is real. And it does that rather convincingly, right? I mean, it looks like you're there and I'm here, right? We look separate. Our senses would tell us we're separate. But what we're learning here is that all of that was created just to try to prove the separation is true. This whole experience we're having is a massive hallucination that is trying to underline the idea that we are apart, that there is an other. It's never happened. It's not possible.
Well, going back to the idea of war, then the two people that are at war are together, or the same, or how do you look
Right.
at it?
There is no war. And those people at war who seem to be in conflict, they are mired in the ego thought system. They could not be experiencing that level of pain and suffering unless they believed that they were separate from God. And so all of us, seemingly billions of people here on this planet, right? We all seem to be working on this in our own way. But on another level, we're actually all waking up together, right? This is just a vision of separation that's unfolding. But as the mind wakes up, what happens is the seemingly separate individuals actually do start to wake up. So again, we have the symbol of Jesus waking up from the dream, showing us pure love in the face of attack. This is a very potent story and potent symbol. And as the collective mind awakens, each of us will start to wake up. And then it's sort of like, I think of it like the opposite of Humpty Dumpty, right? Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall and he crashed in all these pieces. Well, the healing is like all the pieces coming back together. And actually not just coming back together, but it's almost like rewinding the movie. The opposite of the fall we're going to rewind it. So the Humpty Dumpty is still whole. Right? The Son of God is still whole. We are still completely one and have never separated. So this story of two soldiers on a battlefield attacking each other is actually like a fantasy. It's a dream that never really occurred. And as each of us awaken, we realize that. A bit like in the morning when we remember a dream, but we're realizing it never really happened. Like, oh, that seems so real, right? I really thought that was happening. And then we catch it and we're like, oh no, but it didn't happen, right? That never happened at all. And we're going to actually see that about our experience here, that none of it really ever happened at all. So this fits along with another workbook lesson, which is number 65. My only function is the one God gave me. Well, what is my function? My function is to remember my right mind, right? This remembering my right mind is synonymous with the miracle, it's synonymous with forgiveness. And this is what we just have to do again and again. And whatever our battlefield in our life is, we need to remember that there's a choice. Now, this is the hard part, and sort of going back to Bob Newhart's stop it, right? The hardest part about stopping our ego when it's going is catching it, right? I mean, Charlie had the story. Here's a guy who's been teaching a course for a good number of years, and he wasn't remembering his right mind for a while, right? He wasn't remembering that there was a choice. Now, we all have these kinds of experiences. But it's the catching it, right? We need to remember. We need to remember that we have a choice. And when the ego is really revved up, it can be a little tricky to remember that there's another choice, that we want peace instead of this, that we've been listening to the ego. But the good news is that the more we do it, it's like we're deepening a groove, and we're creating a track that we can follow. And the more kind of that the path is well worn, the easier it is to just get back on it.
When Newhart said stop it, what was he referring to?
Well, the whole...
She kept having a dream that she was being buried alive in a box. So he said, stop it. And then at the end, he finally says, stop it or I will bury you alive in a box. So, because, you're doing it to yourself. It's that idea. I mean, it is the one lesson 5, that Jerry Jampolsky in his book repeats verbatim.
Yeah.
The rest of them he kind of clumps together, but that one of the 365 he translates them into 12, but that's the one that he lists verbatim. So he looks at it like a movie projector, and so think of your mind, right, as this movie projector, and what you see is what you get, right? What I put out there, what I project onto you. All of my false beliefs come from either some belief that I've created about some person, place, or thing. And then the second part is the one that you mentioned, which is, and then when I'm done with all that, and the ego, and I recognize it, then the ego says, really? You're going to take that from him? Like, what's wrong with you? And so you can turn it on yourself then, too. And so that forgiveness cycle is one where you have to recognize, I think, all of those things that reinforce your false beliefs. My belief, my projection onto you is something about a false belief I've created within myself. And then when I turn on myself, I'm either trying to reinforce one of those false beliefs or buy into what the ego wants me to see. So it's there's a number of steps to it. Like you said, you have to recognize it, right?
Yeah.
And I have to remember who I am.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you kind of refer to it as a groove. I have another friend who says practice, practice, practice.
Yeah.
Because war is like the ego's ultimate manifestation of a belief in scarcity and conflict. But the Course would have us believe that I can get that same benefit, oneness as opposed to separation, in almost any conflict in my life.
Yeah.
So I don't have to think of it as war, because the ego wants to make that big and complicated for you. Think of it as the guy who cut in front of you at the grocery store. And how am I going to deal with that conflict? And if I use all those opportunities as practice to dispel the ego's ability to create these false beliefs, who I think I am, all those things then should ultimately make the big stuff not seem so big, right? I mean, that's
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, you just keep doing it on everything in your life, and then you can start to deal with some of the bigger things. You don't have to start with the big thing, you know. But I think what Michael's really saying is, if somebody cuts in front of you in the grocery store, don't pull out a machete, right? Is that my understanding?
Actually, what I tried to do is go get his shopping cart and bring it back to the store.
Oh.
So something like that. So, I mean, like I had this realization when one of our kids was going through a lot of issues, and I felt so powerless, and still do to a large extent, honestly. But you know, they talk about this idea of triggers, and there are people who believe like that there are these triggers, and they refer to it as, don't think of it as a trigger, because there's something inevitable about that. You know, I pulled the trigger and the chamber fires, and death is imminent, right? So
Cause and effect.
don't think of it that way. Think of it as a prompting event, right?
Mhm.
And in those prompting events, I can choose to think
Yes.
with the ego, or I can choose to think with the Holy Spirit. And so it's not inevitable, right? In the beginning, the ego always talks first.
Yeah.
But I think if you can practice enough, maybe,
Yeah.
no, I've not had this experience, but maybe, you know, Holy Spirit, I hear first instead of always hearing the ego.
Yeah, it's like you're disabling the trigger, right? So rather than it being a surefire thing, it starts to become a some of the time thing, and then it becomes a only occasionally kind of thing, and eventually the trigger doesn't work at all, right? It's the gun that doesn't fire. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, there's it reminded me of the section dreamer of the dream, you know. So if we start to recognize that, if we Jesus is telling us, look, this is a dream, this is an illusion, it's not real, it's not happening. So all the stories that we make up, you know, be it the guy in traffic or the guy shooting a rifle at me in the foxhole, right, are all stories that I've made up here just to reaffirm the dream, make the dream real. And that's what the ego wants me to buy into, because then it reinforces this idea that I, Charlie, and my father, God, are separate from one another, right? And that's what I have to be. That's what I want to start to wake up to. I want to start to wake up that I am the dreamer of the dream, right? Suffering is an emphasis upon all that the world has done to injure you, right? He sees himself attacked unjustly and by something not himself. He is the victim of this something else, a thing outside himself, for which he has no reason to be held responsible. He must be innocent because he knows not what he does, but what is done to him. Now you are being shown you can escape. All that is needed is you look upon the problem as it is and not the way that you have set it up, which is what I've done in the dream. I've set the story up in the dream. And the problem is simply look at the way it is just that I've set this story up because of my belief in separation. There is none of this stuff going on in heaven, right? But separation tells me that I'm not in heaven. So without the clouds, the problem will emerge in all its primitive simplicity, right? The choice will not be difficult because the problem is absurd when clearly seen. No one has difficulty making up his mind to let a simple problem, right, be resolved if it is seen as hurting him, and also very easily removed. The reasoning by which the world is made, on which it rests, by which it is maintained, is simply this: you are the cause of what I do. Your presence justifies my wrath, and you exist and think apart from me. While you attack, I must be innocent, and what I suffer from is your attack. And then he talks about the need to see this differently, right? And he said there is indeed a need. The world's escape from condemnation is a need which those within the world are joined in sharing, yet they do not recognize their common need. So again, he's telling us, in this world of individuality, all we really need is see oneness, recognize oneness. And yet we, in this crazy world, don't see that. We can't see it, can't possibly see it, because we're believing this is true.
You're talking about oneness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Recently in Hawaii and in Florida, there were mass shootings. How do we look at the shooters?
Again, what we want to recognize is that if this is the dream, right? In my dream right now, I've got shooters doing I've got people doing mass shootings, right? So now in the world of the ego, I can say that individual in that body over there, this guy, right, is guilty of doing this thing. What I can also say is this story that I just told, right, about this guy shooting these other people is a manifestation of my belief in separation. That's all it really is. It's a son of God delivering a story that separation is real.
How do we look on this in terms of oneness?
Because that is the dream. There is no shooting in heaven. There are no bodies in heaven to be shot, right? None of those things are really happening. If I've got a story of bodies, I'm in the dream. Your body and my body, right? This body and that body, I'm in the dream because there are no bodies in heaven. There are no bodies in oneness, right? The truth is we are spirit. We are not these bodies. And the myriad lessons in the course tell us just that. I'm not a body. I am free. I'm still as God created me. I'm spirit. And that's, the radical thought process, thought system that Barret introduced in his intro. It's a simple concept. I'm not a body. I'm spirit. Simple, right? But it's so radical we can't buy into it because we're so trapped in this world of wrong-minded thinking, this world of insanity, right? This world of projection of sin, guilt, and fear. We're so used to doing it, right? We're protecting this castle in the sky that doesn't exist. We're protecting it from this attack that is coming from peace, right? There's no attack coming from peace. There's no God punishing us. There's no God saying we're separate.
Did people die in this event?
Bodies seemingly die, yes. Seemingly, right? In my dream, yes, their bodies dying. I went to a memorial service last weekend. Yeah, there was somebody passed away.
And how do we feel about these bodies dying?
Well, that's a choice you can make. You can feel sad about it. You can feel hurt about it. You can feel joyous about it. You can feel any way you want to choose. There's no set rule that says I have to. Ken Wapnick made a very valid point. You don't walk into a funeral home and go up to the casket and tell the family, "Oh, it's no big deal. The body, this is just a body. He was never here anyway." And you don't do that. We believe we're living in this world, and there's certain things that we do in this world. So if I get a tinge of sadness because somebody has passed away, that's what I do in this world. That's a choice I make. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right? If I also recognize that this was a vehicle that was being used in this dream, and I'm disassociated from it in that sense, that's fine too. It doesn't make a difference.
You see it in how people react as well. So after studying the course for a while, I stopped saying I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah.
I started saying, what a wonderful person.
Yeah.
What a great example of a life well lived.
Yeah.
Thank
you, Jim.
I just changed my perspective of it. It wasn't, nothing else changed. Nobody else, the events, people still died.
Yeah. Jim Fox.
I wasn't able to stop that.
Yeah.
Or feel that, or control those things. But what I can control is how I choose to see that.
Yeah. So I have a relative, a baby, going through some really bad stuff right now, and my sister, the grandmother, is expressed to me on the phone the other day. She said, they say God only gives you what you can handle, and I don't know how much more I can take. And my reaction, in my mind, because I can't voice this to her, she wouldn't understand it. But my reaction is, I'm sorry you feel this way. God's really not doing anything to you. We are the dreamer of the dream. God is perfect oneness. God is perfect love. There is no story of separation going on here. There's no story of bodies. There's just one thing happening here. Love, creation, right? Love, oneness, creation. These are wonderful synonyms up here. That's what truth is. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. And that's every body that's ever been created. Not real, it doesn't exist.
It's the same thing with the shootings too. I think there's a lot of people who say, how could there be a God if he lets all of this happen? And the reality is maybe those shootings have more to do with certainly they have to do with separation. So whatever prompts that shooter personality is is again just another example of reinforcing a false belief about their brother, about themselves, and so that reinforces the separation. Again, it's one of those big examples as opposed to being cut off in the grocery line, right? I mean, but it's all the same thing. It's all.
So you guys, this is so great. This is what I popped open to, right? Recognizing the spirit. You see the flesh or recognize the spirit. There is no compromise between the two. If one is real, the other must be false. For what is real denies its opposite. There is no choice in vision but this one. What you decide, and this determines all you see and think is real and hold as true. On this one choice does all your world depend. For here have you established what you are as flesh or spirit in your own belief. Yeah, right? Belief system. In your own belief. If you choose flesh, you never will escape the body as your own reality, for you have chosen that you want it so. But choose the spirit, and all heaven bends to touch your eyes and bless your holy sight, that you may see the world of flesh no more except to heal and comfort and to bless. Wow. So now, wait a minute. So you're telling me that if I want to recognize this, my function here is to love, bless, and heal? Wow. Wow. I'd like that. My function to love, bless, and heal.
And
I think that's the function of well, it's the function that the guy that dictated this book was practicing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, love, bless, and heal. Everybody saw. You just saw the Son of God.
You choose to project or stop it, and then there's an extension. I love how it's so natural. Then once you stop projecting, the extension of love just happens.
I'm going to live with the rest of my life with Bob Newhart. Stop it.
It's highly recommended.
You can find it. You can find it on YouTube. Yeah, yeah. It's a great skill. It's a great skill. Yeah, as always, these things all fit together.
When you talk about projection, what were you referring to again?
All of my false beliefs about my brother, or myself, because it tends to reflect back on me. So they're all those false beliefs that I have created about some person, place, or thing. So those are the projections that I make. And what's amazing is when you turn that movie camera off and you think about the work that goes with projecting, it sounds like it takes work to do. And once you stop doing that, then of course, at least I like to think of it as, then I just start extending. I don't project anymore. I just naturally extend love. I mean, think of it like with a child, like unconditional love, and how easy it is, and how eternal it is, right? And how there's no judgment or guilt or what. If I could treat all of my brothers that way, because I, haven't formed the same judgments,
Yeah.
Somebody told me once to think of it like a baby, and how because even with your own kids, when they're babies, that unconditional love actually it just extends. As they get older, I start to impose judgments on them too. And
exactly.
Right. And I see attack.
Pick up your road.
Right. So, I think there's something about that for me that's helpful, is to think of that baby and like how would I project all of my crap onto that baby, or would I just extend love? I mean, it's the absence of all of the false beliefs and judgments that I impose on all my other relationships.
And as you were saying, Michael, when we keep healing the guilt within, that vision of innocence just naturally occurs, because this is our true state of being, is to see innocence and love everywhere and in everything. So this example of the mass shootings that have happened is actually really, useful, because we often struggle to apply these principles to these types of situations. But to actually see that at the depth of the being of these people who've killed these other people, the depth of who they are is the Christ as well. The truth of who they are is the light of God. Now, they might not be in touch with it, right? You would have to be disconnected a lot from it in order to do things like that. But even if you're mostly disconnected from it, no one is ever 100% disconnected from their truth. They can't be, right? At the very core of their being, they are that light and love. So then our task becomes, how do I feel about this, right? What does this bring up in me? Does it make me feel hatred towards them? Does it make me feel judgmental towards them? And if that's my reaction, then this is the work that I have.
That's right.
Then you're saying it's possible to look at the shooter with love?
Yes. As the Course says, everything in the world is either an expression of love or a call for love. Now, this is clearly not an expression of love, so then it has to be a call for love. And our duty then is, well, am I willing to answer this call for love with love, or am I going to answer this call for love with condemnation? Now, that doesn't mean we don't arrest this person and put them in a prison, perhaps, and do whatever needs to be done to keep others safe from them. But we can do all of that with complete kindness and care in our hearts. It doesn't have to be done making them a monster, making them evil. There's a lot of words thrown around people who do these sorts of things that are very much a way to try to separate, right? And again, as we're talking about, what does that do? Well, the real reason we do that is because our inner guilt is too much for us to bear. And so we push it out. There's a very convenient scapegoat. So, I mean, if we want to find us someone to put some blame on, someone to put some guilt on, just open your eyes. So there's going to be someone out there, right? And turn on the news, and you've got a million of them. But our work as spiritual students is to really see our commonality with that shooter. To realize that just like they have an ego and they have a right mind, and they have the decision to choose between the two, we have those same parts within us.
We're talking about the shooter. How about the people that have been shot? How do they play into this?
Yeah. So on the level of form, all of this is, the Course says the script is written. So when we bring that idea into this conversation, what it means is that on a deep level that most people are not conscious of, all of the people involved in that school shooting chose to be in that scene, right? Now, I'm not saying they chose it on an individual level, right? The individual would not choose that. But on the level of the collective Son of God, when we chose collectively the idea of separation, we chose all of it. We chose all of the murder, we chose all of the war, we chose all of the illness, we chose all the suffering. And so on that level, all of those people did choose, just along with us, we chose that experience, even just as being witnesses to it. Now, it's important to remember that choice happened at the metaphysical level of the collective self, because otherwise there's a tendency to blame people, right? Oh, I did this, Barret caused this, but Barret didn't do this, right? Just like Fred didn't do this. Just like even the shooter on that level didn't choose to become a shooter, or the victims as an individual didn't choose, to die of a gunshot wound. But on the level of the collective self, yes, that was all chosen by us. And that's important to see, because that helps us step out of the idea that we could be a victim of this. So again, it's sort of a fine point, and I think in spiritual communities it sometimes gets muddied, because there is a kind of an idea floating around that you created your reality, right? But when most people hear that, they think of it as you as a person created this story you're going through, and that's not what the Course is teaching. It is teaching that you want to become responsible for your thoughts and realize all of this is coming from you. But again, the you, as I'm saying that, is not a person. And it never has been a person. It's what we call the decision maker. This is the part of the mind that chooses peace or chooses fear. So it's not always an easy topic, but I think these perspectives can help us actually be more helpful in these circumstances. That if we are personally confronted with a situation like that, we can respond appropriately. We can do whatever needs doing, but it doesn't have to be an angry, upset kind of reaction. A friend who kind of went through it, just a personal version of this, where he was at a party and there was someone who was being violent. I don't remember if they were throwing punches or what was happening. And his response was to tackle the guy and sit on him, right? Pin him down and just keep him from hurting anyone else. And he, in his retelling, he was able to do that without being mad at the guy, without thinking the guy was awful, right? He was just able to do what was helpful and help the situation at the same time. And I think that's a good kind of, example that we can grasp of how we can start to be around these sorts of, violent or tough situations. But at the same time, we don't have to go and try to solve the problem. The most helpful thing in a situation that's violent might be for us to run away and call 911. So the course isn't advocating a specific path, but it's advocating how we are in our mind as we go through this situation.
So when you do that work, you talk about the idea of tapping into the feelings, right? And I do think that there's a real sense of that. And there's some folks in the course that would say, then you have to take that feeling and work backwards and think of other times where you've experienced the same feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that work, you start to figure out what the false belief is that's prompting all of those feelings, right?
Yeah.
When I feel ashamed, when I feel guilty, whatever, not good enough,
Yeah.
then those are things that I can trace back. And if I don't do that work, they just keep happening.
Right.
Until I learn
Right.
to focus on that false belief and then say, thank God that isn't true.
Yeah.
That's not who I am. So, do you find that is part of the work, or do you approach it from a different perspective?
You want to jump in, or maybe I'll answer?
No, go ahead,
Okay.
answer. Yeah.
The way I would say is that's often helpful, right? It's often helpful to remember that childhood issue that is resulting in the situation. As you guys both know, I do past life work, or to go back to the past life and look at what that piece is. At the same time, those pieces are sort of partway on the journey, right? Because as you go deeper and deeper, at the very core, at the very essence of it, we always come back to the tiny mad idea. That's the deepest level. But what you're saying is actually really helpful, because sometimes people using these principles will try to skip over, their personal, trauma, and just go right to this idea. Well, it's all an illusion. I don't need to worry about it. At the same time, they're feeling miserable, and they're really hating themselves or hating other people. And it's like, oh no, but it's a dream, so I'm okay. So there's even a term for this. It's called metaphysical ghosting, which is denying our own inner pain or suffering or sorrow and covering it over with the idea the world is a dream. I don't need to worry about any of it. And so it's helpful you name that, because that's a kind of a caution as you do this work. Don't neglect your own personal traumas or stories just because they're not true. If you're buying into them, you're gonna suffer from them as long as you are. And looking at them with kindness and compassion is really, that's what forgiveness is, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of work. At first, I found it very hard to even identify what a feeling was.
Mm.
I kept making statements that were really judgments. They weren't feelings.
Yeah.
I was even judging what was happening as opposed to keying into the feeling. So it takes some work.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
But it's interesting that you brought this up, because I was just looking at the tail end of chapter 31, right? Choose once again. So it says, choose once again if you would take your place among the saviors of the world, or would remain in hell and hold your brothers there, which is what we're doing here, right? For he has come, and he is asking this. And then a paragraph below that, trials are but lessons that you failed to learn, presented once again. So where you made a faulty choice before, you can now make a better one, and thus escape all pain that what you chose before has brought to you. So it's very clearly saying that when I choose this, right, it's just a faulty choice. It's all it really is. I could choose to work with Holy Spirit. It's a reminder of that, right? Anything going on is, and that's why this repetitive nature of it seems to be, it seems to be repetitive, because I haven't really gone back to this you, Son of God, and recognize that this is going on.
You brought it up in the past. What does the arrow represent?
A belief system. A belief system. So the thing I wanted to mention here was that the you that Jesus is talking to in the Course so much is this Son of God. when Barret was just describing how when we buy into this, we buy into all of it. We buy into murder, we buy into lack, we buy into disease, we buy into all these different stories that are going down here. That's the Son of God buying into it. We've individualized it here in the illusion. We make it all about bodies, but it's really this belief system the Son of God had, this tiny mad idea that somehow I'm not in heaven. Somehow God and I are separate. That's the tiny mad idea, right? It's not true, but we believe it is true. We've made a decision that it's true, that I'm separate from my Father. And in that decision, the Son of God made, all this other crap comes along with it. All the murder, all the shootings, all the disease, all the fights, all the spats, all the, I gotta kill that bug. I mean, every insane thought that goes on, this whole story, this whole dream. I am the dreamer of this dream. And I've taken it to such an extreme that this dream is all about Charlie. This is Charlie's world going on. This is what Charlie thinks. This is what Charlie feels. This is what Charlie imagines, right? It's all about that. And I put everything in those terms, Charlie's little world. I just now have learned recently through this presentation from Jesus that I can go back here, right? As he's saying, right? Make a choice. Trials are but lessons you failed to learn, presented once again. So where you made a faulty choice before, you now can make a better one. Right? What's the better choice? I made a faulty choice. How about working with the right man? The memory of God. This is so key. It's inside all of us. The memory of God is within us. That's who we truly are. We are this. We are the Son of God. That's who we truly are. We are not some crazy guy named Charlie over here, but pissed off at every driver in the world. It's not, it seems like it's real to me, right? Seems like I'm pulling the plug out, but I can't pull the plug out. There's no plug. I am this, right? That's who I truly am. Right? And there's no fear involved here. There's no guilt. There's no blame. There's no projection. None of that stuff's happening. Not reality.
Again, it's our maladaptive solution to a non-existent problem, right? All of this is our way to try to cope with the thought of separation and our belief that it's true. So I know it's been far too long without some corny jokes, so let me throw a few in here.
Let's vote.
That's right. I won't let him vote. This is a dictatorship. So my friend is really scared of elevators.
My what?
My friend?
My friend.
He's really scared of elevators. And so I asked him what he does about it. And he said he takes steps to avoid them.
It's a corny joke.
So I knew someone who would actually tell his wife jokes while she was in labor to keep her mind off the pain. But they didn't amuse her very much. I guess it was the delivery. Did you know that on the Canary Islands there isn't a single canary? It's actually the same on the Virgin Islands too. Not one canary there either.
Oh man.
Oh yeah, lots of good stuff here. So I wanted to read a little bit here. Well, actually, this is in chapter 19. And we've been talking a lot about the problem and about how we work with this, right? The problem of the ego, and again, today being the theme of cause and effect. Cause and effect are on this chart too. Cause is up here, and effect is down here. All right. So what is this saying? Cause is the split mind, content. Right. This is what they're kind of synonymous. Effect is mindlessness. Right. So the effect of choosing the ego is that we're mindless. We don't remember we have a choice to choose peace, and that we are mired in a world of form. So again, content is sort of synonymous with cause. Form is sort of synonymous with effect. And again, if we just keep that in mind as we work with the course, it can help some of these ideas make more sense to us and help us remember what this is all about. And the more that we work with this, the more that we practice these principles, the more we start to come into an experience of our right mind. And our right mind is our truth, right? Our right mind is actually our state that leads to truth, I should say. He makes a distinction between right-mindedness and one-mindedness. Being in a right mind more and more will ultimately lead us to the experience of our one mind. So that's what we do. His goal in the course is actually not to get us all the way to the one mind, but to get us into our right mind. Because Jesus knows that if we hang on our right mind, it's inevitable. We're gonna awaken back to our truth. The challenge is most of us don't want to hang out here, and we need to practice. He says miracles are habits, right? So it's a habit to choose this. We need to develop this habit. How do we develop a habit? We practice.
You said most of us don't want to hang out there.
Right. Well, just look at the world, right? How many people are in peace? If we just look at a cross-section of the world, not many, right? That's what I mean by that. Maybe consciously, people would say, I want to be peaceful. But unconsciously, very few people actually genuinely want that. And that's the state of the world, right? This is why in one of the workbook lessons, I want the peace of God is the title of the workbook lesson. What does he say? He says to say these words is nothing, but to mean these words is everything, right? So to really mean this, how do we mean it? We mean it by every time we fall back into the ego saying, no, thank you. No, thank you. I've been down that road. I don't want to choose it anymore. I'm choosing love instead. And that's how we mean it, right? So we mean it, I got all these opportunities in our daily life and the world at large.
I know we kick it around so much, but why do we choose the ego? It's just, it seems almost stupid.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Well, that's again what he's pointing. That's insane. Yeah, that's what he's pointing out right at the very beginning of the course. That's what I was saying. The beginning of the course, he's showing us this is the way you think. It's in words on the pages. This is the way you think. You think this way, and it's insane. He tells us you're insane. It is crazy.
Yeah.
And yet we continue to believe it. That's the dilemma we have.
Yeah.
How can you who are so holy suffer?
Yeah.
But yet we do it all the
And yet
time.
we choose it over and over and over again.
I mean, another way to ask that question is to say, well, if you have a bad habit, why do you keep doing that?
Yeah,
Smoking, drinking, and any sort of addictive issue. You could say to someone, why do you keep doing that? That hurts you. Don't you see that? Well, yeah, choosing the ego hurts us, but we keep doing it.
There's a great expression in recovery, in 12-step recovery, and it's stinking thinking. I'm going back to my stinking thinking, the thinking that got me here, right? And that's what we do in this. This is just stinking thinking. That's all it is. And yet it's what we're used to. So I keep choosing it over and over and over again, until I start to recognize when I choose stinking thinking, when I choose this, it doesn't feel so good.
It almost seems that it's comfortable for some people.
It is. Believe me, when I sat down at the bar and ordered my next drink, it seemed comfortable. It wasn't, but it seemed that way. That's the lie I was telling myself with my stinking thinking. And then I'll have the next drink, and then I'll have the next one, and the next one, right? That's a lie. I keep telling myself over and over and over again with my stinking thinking. This one's going to make me feel better, right? This guilt projection is going to make me feel better, right? This fear is going to make me feel better. And when you look at it, it's totally insane. And yet I believe it. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all good.
Push you aside there. Get out of it.
So,
Separate beings.
that's right. A rumble of course teachers here. Yeah. So again, the more we practice it, the more we weaken our attachment to the ego and strengthen our attachment to Holy Spirit. So I'm just going to, share a paragraph here in chapter 19 that talks about the outcome of the right-minded choice. He says, love too would set a feast before you on a table covered with a spotless cloth, set in a quiet garden where no sound but singing and a softly joyous whispering is ever heard. This is a feast that honors your holy relationship and at which everyone is welcomed as an honored guest. And in a holy instant, grace is said by everyone together as they join in gentleness before the table of communion. And I will join you there, as long ago I promised and promise still. For in your new relationship am I made welcome, and where I am made welcome, there I am. So for all our addictiveness, for all our choosing the ego, the truth is still true. And that's it.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you guys for being
Thank
here
you
today.
for being here.
Very much. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Our next event is going to be a Course in Miracles retreat. This is January 4th and 5th. It's going to be in Racine, Wisconsin at the Sienna Retreat Center. Love to have you there. I think that's going to take the place of our Good News next month. So then we'll probably do the next one in early February in this format. So
Yeah, so yeah, that would be awesome if you'd like to come. We're going to have a wonderful time. It's priced right. It's everybody's got their own room at the place. We've got meals provided, and it's going to be a great experience. It'll be just the two of us. We'll probably get some jokes from Barret, you know.
I have to go back to my archives.
Price of admission.
Worth the price right there. Yeah,
Don't want to scare you away.
Yeah, exactly. But if you'd like to join us, please. There's some information on the table back there.
Yeah,
reach out to Barret, and sign up. That'd be great.
Yeah, and Merry Christmas to you guys too.
Yeah, and then also next weekend on Sunday, which is the 15th, right? Yeah, the 15th. I'm going to be down with Maureen Muldoon down at her place in Hinsdale. I'm one of the presenters down there. She asked us to, there are three of us that are going to do something. I don't know full details about it yet. Something about the Magi, something about the wise men. And I said, oh, it's a comedy routine.
It sounds like a setup coming from her.
Yeah, I will when I get some. I'll get some more information from Maureen. I don't have it yet, but she's got a little facility down there, the old Emmanuel Lutheran Church down there. She uses on Sunday every Sunday morning. She's got a great little program.
She's a friend.
She's a course teacher. I don't know how I don't remember how I met her. When I first got involved with her, I probably met her through Joe Wolf. That's what I'm guessing.
Information, you may know it, but Sarah McCoy was the founder at Unity in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
She passed away last week.
Oh, okay. Yeah, did not know her. Yeah.
All right.
But anyway, yeah. So that is 10. I'll get it for you, Mike. It's 10 or 10:30. Yeah.
Yeah, the Sunday service.
Sunday service down there. Yeah. So I'm going to try to get a bunch of folks to come down.